Hi, we're Shannon and Jerry Arner.
And our dog, Betty White.
Your hosts of the Arner Adventures podcast.
Could we have named it something more creative? Probably. But it's the name of our blog. It's our last name. We're on an adventure. Yada, yada, yada. After owning our own business, working 24/7.
And don't forget a mental breakdown in between.
We made a lifestyle change and decided to make the most out of life.
We sold our house, most of our belongings, downsized, and moved to the coast.
We live life minimally, but fully.
We live each day as an adventure.
This show will help you learn how to live life more fully, with more intention, by experiencing more, and with less stuff.
We'll talk about our own experiences, interview others who have much to share by creating a spark in our lives.
Some days we'll share real-life ongoings of what we're going through, and others will talk about our favorite flavor of waffle.
Come join our adventure.
It's the Arner Adventures Podcast.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Shannon.
Hello. And I'm Jerry.
Betty White is snoring in her PETA right here beside us in the Arner Adventures Podcast studio, we like to call it. Yeah. We are back for episode 65 of the Arner Adventures Podcast, and we hope you're still sticking around after that really weird intro.
Yeah, we didn't lose you. Today's guest is another one of those that you think it's going to go the one way.
Mm-hmm.
And man, when you think, we got a 180 spin for y'all.
Yeah.
It's but in a great way, of course. It's another one of the Spark in Our Lives episodes with a multiple award-winning author, Michaelbrent Collings.
Yes. We didn't talk about this on the episode. I didn't even tell Michaelbrent about the last name situation.
Oh, no, you didn't.
That my maiden name is Collins.
Yep.
Very close to Collings.
Very close, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder what nationality that is.
I don't know. We'll have to look it up.
We'll have to look that up.
Well, this episode, this conversation was so interesting, to say the least. It was so raw. We just cannot say how much we appreciate it when our guests open up about the truth of their experiences, accomplishment, really great things, and also the challenges, the really low points.
Oh, yeah. And with that being said, the subject matter in this podcast conversation can be triggering to some. So we highly recommend that you have thoughts of harming yourself, call or text 988 or text TALK. That's all caps TALK to 741-741.
And when you said two, it's TO. Right?
Yeah.
So you can text TALK to TO 741-741. And we take the topic of mental health seriously, as if you're a listener here, you know that. But we also like to put it out in the open. And the more we talk about it, the less stigma there is. But please reach out for help if you feel that you're having your own mental health issues or have questions at all.
Yeah, we'll have resources available in the show notes too.
There were a lot of laughs, though. We don't want to bring this, say that was all that the conversation was. It definitely was not. There were a lot of laughs, and this was just such an enriching conversation. We just want to make sure that we include that disclaimer.
Oh, yeah. So are you ready to go to the convo?
I am ready to get to the convo.
Let's do the convo.
Well, we told you a little bit about today's guest, but now we're going to dig in a little bit deeper. Today's guest is Michaelbrent Collings. Michaelbrent used to be a partner in a law firm. Now he is an indie author, best known for horror, and voted one of the top 20 all-time greatest horror writers in a ranker poll of nearly 20,000 readers. He has written bestsellers in a dozen genres, is the only author ever to be a finalist for the Bram Stoker Award multiple times, the Dragon Award multiple times, and the Roan Award. His work has been featured and reviewed on everything from Publishers Weekly to Scream Magazine to NPR. We have our candles lit, the lights are dim, and we are ready to dig into what makes Michaelbrent Collings tick. Michaelbrent, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. I wish I had known there'd be low lighting. I wouldn't have, put on all my makeup and my wig and stuff like that.
Oh, if our guests could see you, they would see that, and we talked about this before the show, that your lighting is impeccable. It is amazing. I wish that we had better lighting over on our side.
But I really could use a wig. So you're ahead of me there. At least you both have your full heads of hair.
Well, give us a mental picture. Well, the listeners a mental picture. But where are you coming to us from?
I live in the metropolis of Idaho. I grew up in California. I lived there most of my formative years, and then I moved to South America for a couple of years and lived there for 2 years, and then I came back to Los Angeles. And after I got married, my wife and I realized that like our children had literally never played in the front yard without close supervision. Like, let's make sure the rapey guy walking past daily doesn't have a chance to lift our children, you know. So we were like, oh, maybe this is the seventh circle of hell, and we kind of, you know, started looking around for other places. And right about the same time, my in-laws moved to Idaho. And then my father walks in randomly one day with my mom, and he goes, I'm taking early retirement and we're moving to Utah because there's good, cheap housing there. And I'm like, selfishly, my first thought isn't, Dad, that's great, or oh no, or anything like that. I was just like, crap, I don't want to have to travel to 2 places for the rest of my life every Christmas. So I called my in-laws, who are all realtors, and I'm like, you have 2 hours to sell my parents something, or I'm never seeing you again, you know. And so they sold my mom and dad a house, and we kind of trailed along a couple of years later.
I don't know why I wasn't expecting you to say Idaho. I did not know that. But
Idaho's like the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects Idaho.
The first question I have is, when you were in California, did you like always have dreams that you were going to be a lawyer? Like, was that the plan, or did you think, well, that's kind of what I'm supposed to do? Or
no, I don't think anybody, look, if somebody's like, I dream of being a lawyer someday, you should probably either get that person help, or no matter what, stop being their friends, because they're either crazy or they're like that kind of person that argues for fun over Scrabble rules and things like that. Like, somebody who's just generally awful. So I didn't want to be a lawyer when I grew up. I always enjoyed writing, and I enjoyed creativity. But the one thing I really wanted was, I wanted to be a family man. Like, you know, I come from a family of love, and I always wanted that. I knew I liked women, you know, in a generalized kind of a sense. But, you know, as I got older, I knew I wanted to have a family and a wife and kids. And the thing that I wanted second most was not to be that guy bringing women over to my mom's basement and being like, any day, baby, I'm going to make it, I swear, you know, and like 40 years old with my sad rock band that's never going anywhere. So I became a lawyer because I was reasonably good with words, and I had been telling stories my whole life. So I was a good liar, and I just kind of did that to pay the bills. So no, it was never like me dreaming, sitting wishing upon a star, someday I hope I can be a soulless bottom feeder that charges too much for too little. It was a way of paying the bills.
well, you know, sometimes it's that your dad was one, and then your dad's dad was one, and it's like it's expected that that's what you're supposed to do. So
yeah,
I'm always,
not me.
yeah, okay, got it. At what point are you like, okay, I can't do this, I really want to be a writer? And you said you always wrote, but that's a big change, and that's also a big investment in saying, I'm going to go this route. So was it a part-time thing, you know, when something happened, or was it just sort of a transition? Like, how did that come to be?
So I tell people I became a full-time writer because I failed to successfully avoid being a full-time writer. Like I say, I'm a risk-averse person, and I really never wanted to have that kind of creative lifestyle. I didn't dream of being a lawyer, but I dreamed of like having a 401k and a retirement plan, and, you know, dental benefits and stuff like that. And what happened was I had this job, and it was at a respected Los Angeles law firm. It was kind of a boutique firm. It was a very specialized area. And I went along there fine, and I became a partner and an equity partner, and I owned part of the firm and all that stuff. And then my wife got sick. She had this really severe problem with her back. And it sounds like, oh, she had back problems, but I mean, like, saying she had back problems is sort of like, you know, comparing cancer to a hangnail. She had really serious problems. And so I kind of became a part-time lawyer. I mean, I literally went from working law job hours, which are horrendous, to be in there like 20 hours a week. And the rest of the time I'm taking care of my wife. And I'd always written on the side, you know, so I would come home and I'd play with my family, and I'd work my long hours or whatever. And then I'd write at night after my wife went to bed. She's always been an early sleep person. And so I'd write from 10 p.m. until 1 or 2 in the morning. And then I'd get up and do the whole thing again. and that kind of started to gain some traction, but I still wasn't thinking I'm going to be a writer when I grow up. I was still like, I was kind of going, maybe I'll make some extra money on the side and we can put a down payment on a house someday, because California costs so much, you know?
Yeah.
And so one day, after this has been going on for a while, my wife's been sick and I had some health problems that reared at the same time, which was just terrible timing. So the law partners called me in and very politely but firmly invited me to divest myself of my partnership shares. You know, and you can fight that sort of thing because I was part owner, but it's like, what's that going to do? So, you know, we shook hands and I left, and it was terrible timing because my wife and kids had actually come to visit me that day. So they're waiting in like the library across the street. And I walk over and I'm like, we will go have lunch and then I guess we'll leave earlier than planned, you know, like with my box of stuff in my hand. It was a really crappy moment.
It is terrible timing.
Oh, it was awful. Everything about it was awful. And my wife's still sick. You know, she was having one of her good days, which is why she could come and visit me at the office. And I tried to be a lawyer still. I wanted a grown-up job and all that good stuff, but it was right at the time. There's always ups and downs in every industry. And this was oh my gosh, we have too many lawyers in California. So I couldn't get a job to save my life. And luckily at that same time, I had just sold a movie to a big studio. So we had that going for us. I had just heard about this Kindle thing, you know, because it was kind of new back then. And I had put one of my books on it and it got some traction. So I started kind of making a little bit of money and just enough to eke our way through survival for a long time. And it just gradually grew. And, you know, even to this day, it's like people go, oh, don't you love the writing life? And I go, I love a lot about it. I'm very blessed. But it's stressful. I have the dental, you know, I have the same dental insurance as an above average crack whore. And my job security is whatever my last royalty check was, you know, so there's always kind of, you know, that life is rough on people.
Yeah.
But that being said, I've made a life of it. And with the support and love of my family and my freaking angel of a wife and my kids, you know, we've managed to turn it into something fairly successful. So we're really grateful for that and very blessed. But it wasn't like I wasn't that guy who was just going to be a writer no matter what. I really had no desire for that lifestyle. That wasn't in the cards as far as I was concerned.
Wow. Well, first of all, how is your wife?
She's doing much better. She had, long story, very short, she had a terrible quack of a doctor who was more interested in hooking her on pain meds than in fixing her. So we finally got away from him and got to a doctor who was like, oh, I could have fixed this years ago kind of thing. And she had a surgery that was a major surgery and it took a year to recover from. But after that, she's been great. She's in much better shape than I am now.
That leads us to you being an indie author. And then these get, you know, picked up and you start getting traction. It sounds like you were a screenwriter for that film. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like things are going pretty well. And like you said, and we can relate to that. It's like people think you're an entrepreneur, you're your own boss. It must be the dream. Well, yeah, but you're everything. I mean, you know, you're all the titles, all the roles in a business, and you're working all the time. And in some ways it's like, you do like it and it's yours, but it's also it's like, if you don't love your job and you work all the time, you lead to burnout. And if you love your job and you work all the time, it's still the same result at the end, you know?
Yeah.
That sort of brought you to, I'm going to be an indie author. And then eventually have my own publishing company. Like, how did that come to fruition instead of going and seeking an agent and going and doing that route?
Well, so when I started all this, you know, like I say, Kindle was a brand new thing. I mean, literally you could say, hey, do you know what Kindle is? And 9 out of 10 people would have no idea. And this is when I'm in Los Angeles, which is where people are very tech savvy and into that kind of lifestyle. So it wasn't that I was trying to be an indie. In fact, I had been writing, I had these screenplays, and like I say, just fortuitously, one of them got purchased by this company and it gave us a good chunk of money. I sold another one right around the same time. They gave us some more. But I'd never like thought of myself as a screenwriter as much as like I write stories and I write books. And I literally sent my first book to every single publisher, manager, and literary agent in North America who handled that stuff. I have 2 4-inch binders that are just single sheet pages of rejections.
Yeah.
And some of them were nice. They were like, oh, we really liked it, but it's not quite right. And some of us were like, could you go back in time and strangle yourself in the crib so nobody ever reads this again? So, it was like this wide response spectrum.
Wow.
and I put it onto Kindle because a friend told me about it, and I was like, it won't hurt anybody, you know. And the first month, I was just astounded. I sold 6 whole copies or something like that. All of them were probably to my mom. I'm pretty sure she opened a bunch of Amazon accounts, and then I kind of forgot about it because I was still a lawyer at this point. I'm still working, and I'm dealing with my wife's health issues, and I had some health issues that had started to rear their head. And I didn't even know anything was going on with it until about 6 months later. I had a friend who emailed me and was like, please tell Amazon to stop telling me about your book. I don't want it, you know. And I was floored. I had no idea what he was talking about. It turned out it was the #1 best-selling science fiction and #1 best-selling horror title, and it was like #2 on the thriller chart. It was really doing good. And
Wow.
that was awesome. But again, it was like a lot of this, I didn't sit there and go like, oh, I want to be my own boss. I want to be independent. I want to
Yeah.
have all the, it just kind of happened that way.
This episode is brought to you by Southern Oak Artisan.
Southern Oak Artisan makes 100% natural soy candles that are not only aesthetically pleasing, but are safe to breathe, since they are made with non-toxic ingredients, and they're not overwhelming like other candles you may be used to.
Between morning brew, lemon bake, lavender, there's just so many scents to choose from.
Southern Oak Artisan 100% natural soy candles are handmade in our home state here in North Carolina, but lucky you, they ship all over the U.S.
Yes, lucky indeed. Head over to arneradventures.com/Southern Oak Artisan, where you can grab our discount code and link to save on your soy candle purchase.
That's arneradventures.com/Southern Oak Artisan. It's also in the show notes.
And now back to the show.
And one of the things I tell people, if you're going to be in this line of work, is you have to be flexible and accommodating to opportunity. So, you know, I took the opportunity that came that like there were some people that liked my books, and I'd like to cater to that and maybe get some more of that audience and try and grow that. But at the same time, there's indies out there who are just so hostile to anything that reeks of traditional publishing, or, you know, I'm not selling my soul to the man. And I'm like, my soul is highly for sale. It's just the man has to offer me enough money for, like, I'm actually in a very long-term negotiation right now with a fairly large publishing company. Because I'm happy to turn over some of that work. It's just, they have to be able to pay me more than I'm going to pay myself. And at this point, most of them can't kind of guarantee that, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm perfectly willing to work for somebody else because, like you said, people think, oh, you're living the dream. You're your own boss. I'm like, I have 1 million bosses. All my readers are my bosses. It's a little more dispersed, but I'm still answering to tons of people every single day.
Yeah.
Hanging out your own shingle just means you switch to your boss as your client, or your boss as your reader, or your audience, if you know, for your podcast or whatever it is. You're not just sitting there being like, I'm going to make myself happy today. That's the best way to go out of business. You know, people who say that, they're like, I follow my muse wherever I go. I'm like, well, you're a sociopathic homeless person then, because that's not how you stay in business.
Your big awards are in horror, and you know, you're one of the great horror writers. So I guess that question is, what makes you want to go into horror writing?
So it's a combination of things. One, I think it was Ray Bradbury. Someone said something to the effect, you're such a good writer. Why do you waste time on horror? And his response was like, why do you think I have a choice? You know, I think there's some people that just kind of gravitate to it, you know, that find it, to outsiders, to people who don't like horror. And I have nothing against them. You know, variety is the spice of life. It would be terrible if everybody was just like me. But people who don't like horror, I find they tend to have kind of a warped perspective on it. And when I drill into it, what they really don't like is horror movie posters. Like, they've never actually experienced a wide enough variety of horror to say if they like it or not. They just know, I don't like the Saw posters. They make me feel icky. And plus there's too many boobs. And I'm like, that's, you know, horror isn't that. That's a really kind of a myopic vision of what it is. So my father, he was an educator. He was a professor at a major university, and he fell in love with horror, and not in sort of a generalized way, but he was one of the first people out there saying, this stuff is literature. It's not just schlocky stuff. When I went to school, you could literally get sent to the counselor's office for holding a Stephen King book. They just assumed something was dreadfully wrong with you.
Yep.
And so my father is out there, one of the first people who was saying, this is legitimate literature. It has literary value. We should appreciate it and study it. He wrote the first book-length scholarly analysis of Stephen King. So I grew up
Ooh.
with typing and screaming in the next room. It was just sort of home base. My dad would be watching a Stephen King movie or watching a John Carpenter movie. I remember he had this guy over. He's like, I saw this kid's student film. It was really good. I think this guy's going to go places. And so this guy's, just some student who had made a student film, and we're eating dinner. And my dad's like, be really nice to Frank Darabont. I really think he's going places. And for people who don't know who that is, he's the guy who directed like The Green Mile, The Shawshank Redemption, The Truman Show, all of these major Stephen King things. So that was just kind of the world I grew up in. I remember my parents, tucking us in bed and being nice to the sitter. We're going to Dean Koontz's housewarming party and we won't be back late, because my dad had done so much work in that world. It just kind of was everywhere. So, when I started writing, it wasn't like, I love ghastly stuff. People are always kind of surprised. They're like, oh, you write horror. You seem so nice. Like, we're expecting you to make a wallet out of our faces halfway through the interview. And I'm just like a normal guy, but I like ghost stories and I like spooky things. And also they afford you a wider latitude for examining metaphysical questions. I mean, like if you're writing a science fiction book, you really can't talk about the afterlife. You're constrained to some extent by reality. Whereas in horror, you're like, hey, let's talk about a situation where the devil exists and like a priest is going to have to save the day because God also exists. Let's talk about that. And it's a really cool way to discuss big things that are kind of verboten in a lot of other milieu.
I've never been as fearful as reading a horror book. And I love that. Like, I love being pushed. Like, I don't know why. Maybe there's an issue with me, but because it's also like terrifying and I don't want this to happen, But the books are, I just think, and maybe it's because you use your own imagination and create this horror, but it's into the writing, but it's, Stephen King can terrify me to no end.
Right.
So, but the movies, yes, are scary, but the books are scarier to me. What do you think?
Never read any horror at all. I'm one of those people. Well, I like the posters actually, but and I tend to watch from time to time. We get on little kicks, maybe with some horror stuff, and yes, I do enjoy that. And but reading horror, no, I've just never done it. And I'm of that age too, where you always had that friend or that roommate who had that row of Stephen King books on their shelf, and
right.
I thought I ought to pick one of those out one day, and then they'd make the movie out of it.
Mom and my uncle are big Stephen King fans, so yeah, we had that bookshelf, so I remember coming to the age where she finally was like, okay, maybe you can read Thinner. Thinner was the first book I ever read of him. And so and it was still terrifying. It was just terrifying. But I had to become an age where she would say, okay, you can take a book from the Stephen King shelf.
Right.
That also leads me to the question of, is there a certain mindset you have to be in to write it, whereas a different genre, or is your process still the same across the board?
The process in general terms is pretty similar. I mean, because again, like I'm a commercial writer. I'm not sitting there being an artiste and, waxing rhapsodic about a dappled petal on the outside of my, my window in winter and how sad everything is. Like I'm trying to write stuff that's going to sell and that my fans will like and that'll get made into a movie. Because that's still where the big money is. As many people as have read Stephen King, you can pick any of his movies and just that movie probably has had more viewers than all of his books combined, because that's the world we live in. The process is always like, I want to write something that's interesting, that's people say never been done before, but that's kind of impossible. Like if you're going to write something that's never been done before or tell a story no one's ever told, probably you're mostly going to see confusion and distaste, because we like certain things. We like a 3-act structure. We like boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl. Like there's things that we just understand. And so I find those things that people understand and I try and put an interesting new spin on them or a new twist that hasn't been done that way before. And so whether I'm writing a scary story or a kid's book, like right now I'm working on a middle grade adventure. And whether I do a middle grade adventure or an adult horror novel, it's going to start with me saying like, what do I want to write? What's something the market's looking for? I kind of go through this checklist of basic ideas. They have to have a cool movie poster. That's something I always sit and think is like, what would the movie poster look like? Because we live in a world that people want to grab things quickly. They want to understand them at least on some level quickly. And so if like I have a good movie poster in my head before I start writing, I know it's going to be an accessible idea. You know, you want something high concept that you can pitch it and people will go, oh, I would definitely buy that book, or I'd definitely see that movie. And so no matter what, I'm going to kind of run through that list. And I'll even tell a lot of the same things, whether I'm talking about a kid's book or an adult book. You know, I wrote a series called Saga of Billy Jones. Sorry, I've written 50 books. They bleed together. And like the first line of the book is like Billy Jones was only 14 the first time he died. And by the end, the last book, everybody in the world dies. Like literally everybody's wiped out, and it's really scary. And so, but it's still for kids. And the difference is not so much subject matter as just the way you talk about it, you know. Kids have lived through the Holocaust. Kids are very, very strong, and you don't want to hurt kids. You can carefully lead them through difficult concepts. That's one of our roles as adults, is to teach our kids how to handle trauma.
When you have this poster in your head or the cover of the book, are you designing the covers as well? Are you outsourcing that and telling them your ideas, or literally is everything? Are you outsourcing?
It's literally everything. Everything
Wow.
is me. Like, you know, your audience can't see it obviously, but like I have a virtual screen in my background, and it's a bunch of covers, and I do all the covers myself. And yeah, I do everything. And that's one of the things that is unique about me, as far as like, you know, and side note, anyone thinking about going into creative stuff, it's hard because we're the weirdest mix of narcissism and cripplingly low self-esteem. Like on one hand, we all artistic types are like, my work will change the world. I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to paint a picture, and the universe will shift and be better, you know? And then someone goes, I really like that. And your first impulse is to kind of look around and be like, are you talking to me? Because we don't believe it, you know, in our hearts. And so it's kind of tough to learn how to talk about yourself in a factual way without downplaying yourself, you know, we're kind of taught to be modest and humble and say, well, it's nothing, you know, and an artistic type has to be out there and be like, let me tell you what kind of a badass I am so that you'll buy my stuff. And so, yeah, I do all this stuff, and I love doing it. It's hard doing it all, and you can't approach it and just be like, well, I guess I'll pick up marketing. It's Thursday, you know, you have to take time learning these
right
things.
I'm curious, from a productivity standpoint, do you batch work days, or how do you stay efficient and productive in all of those roles? I mean, it's writing, publishing, marketing, branding, every podcast. I mean, how do you stay on top of it all and do it well?
One of the biggest things is to have a support group. And by that, I don't mean like a writer's group or an artist group. I don't know if there's like painting groups that you sit and critique each other, because that stuff is just, more often than not, it's just self-congratulatory people who are sitting around saying, I'm going to say something nice about you. Now you better say something nice about me. So I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about your core supporters. And in this, I mean my wife more than anybody. This poor woman, she married this stable lawyer, and 3 years, and I'm like, hey, remember how I like to write stories? That's actually a thing, you know? And she kind of ended up with this guy who is this creative type with all these ups and downs and this total lack of anything resembling security. But through it all, she stuck by me, and she can tell if I'm having a rough, terrible day. She'll say, you've worked 45 hours. It's Tuesday. Maybe go see a movie. Maybe take a minute, you know? So part of it is just her kind of monitoring. And I have severe mental health disorders. I have major depressive disorder, suicidal tendencies, and psychotic breaks. And so she's constantly having to watch that as well, just to make sure that I'm not going to go like poke holes in my neck for fun or something terrible.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing, is really like, if you want to succeed in this kind of business where it's essentially you bring the structure, no one's going to impose it. You have to have people who support you. And by support you, it's not just patting you and saying you're doing great, but telling you like, hey, you're sucking today. You need to get out of bed and do a better job because the family relies on this.
This episode is brought to you by Danadan.
If you're a longtime listener, you've probably heard us tell you before that about 2 to 3 CBD brands reach out to us every week. It wasn't until we started digging into the research that we learned CBD isn't always CBD, and they're not all the same.
Danadan Hempworks makes organic hemp flower infusions. Danadan's products support our daily routine by helping to manage daily stress, promote healthy sleep, provide caffeine-free energy, and recover from activity-related stiffness and soreness.
They also have CBD hemp flower infusion specifically designed for pets, which is great for Betty White. She uses it every day.
Head over to arnerventures.com/Danadan-Hempworks to grab our amazing discount code and link.
That's arnerventures.com/Danadan dash or hyphen hempworks. It's also in the show notes.
Now, back to the show.
Who's going to love you enough to encourage you to be better and let you know when you're not doing what you should or as well as you could. Like every book I write, I read to my wife, and she's my final quality control, because she'll be doing laundry, and if she's just into her laundry or the housework she's doing, whatever it is, I'm like, I'm failing because I'm not captivating her. And she's fine with that. She's like, no, I got stuff to do. It's your job to pull me out of it, man. Or she'll stop and go, I did not understand that. That was so unclear. I'm sure you thought it was genius, but it sounded like gibberish to me. She's honest, and she's telling me this needs to improve. And sometimes the improvement is just that sentence didn't flow. And sometimes the improvement is, Michaelbrent, you're in serious danger of emotional harm. So you need to pause what you're doing and get out into the real world and take a walk or go to the gym, or, even I'm the only man in the world whose wife is like, you should play some video games, just like she's so nice that way. You really need people who are there willing to, prop you up. It's no matter how good you are at how many things, you're going to have bad days and terrible days and days you don't believe in yourself. And I have those more often than most, just as a byproduct of my mental health problems. I'd be dead in a ditch without her. So, but to some extent, I think we all need that. We all need those people in our corner who are not just our cheerleaders, but our actual supporters. They're going to hold us up on days when we're down, and on days where we think we're down, but we're really not. They're the ones who are willing to kick us a little and be like, stop complaining, get up, go to work.
Yeah, I appreciate you opening up about that. I think that, we've talked about this on here before, and I can totally relate to what you're saying. We both have some mental health things going on, and in the past, when like you were talking about working and you can't, sometimes you don't recognize that something is going on, or that you're starting to tank. And I think when you talked about your support and having people around you, you do not, yes, you want someone encouraging and you want someone who is going to believe in you, but you also want someone who's real. Yeah. And I know that there's a small handful of people in my life that are like that. And Jerry's one of them. But I know that, like, in the past, when I have been really, really bad, and Jerry would say, okay, like, I know that you believe in this, and that this is, this is not success. Like, keep pushing, and now you need help. And there are, I think, times that we both are, it's reciprocating, that you can say, okay, hey, do you realize that this is going on? And sometimes you do, and I don't know if you do, but sometimes I do. I know that something is off, but sometimes I'm not able to recognize how bad it's getting.
I'm better with it now, like staying ahead of things. I think when you're younger, you just think, oh, everybody's like this, or everybody's this way.
Yeah.
Well, at least totally. I think when you're young, you choose friends that are as wacky as you too. So it's like, But now I think we're both very sensitive to, okay, I'm thinking this. What am I feeling? What am I, interrelating your thoughts to your feelings, and staying ahead of, am I getting in a spiral funk kind of thing here, or
Yeah. But I think it's very important to have that support of someone who's going to keep it real and not keep going. You're doing such a great job.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The old school methods of walk it off, or you're just hungry.
Yeah.
And look, there's some truth to that. Like, that's one of the struggles with anybody who has actually got a serious mental health problem is like, at what point do I grin and bear it? Because you can't use it as a crutch. I mean, if I was just like, every time I feel low or down or depressed, I let myself not work, I would never work. That's my illness does not permit me to have a life that's full of smiles and sunshine. And so that's just, knowing where that line is, that's where you do need help as well from someone else. So I kind of try and push through it no matter what. And my wife is often the one who's like, no, you're messed up today. You need to stop doing this because A, you're not doing anything good anyways. Like your work is probably terrible today. And B, you're hurting yourself. So she's useful in that sense as being an outside objective observer. If we have a mental health issue, the problem is your brain is in charge of telling you whether you're fine or not. And so if your brain is the defective thing, that's a real issue. That said, like, anyone who goes, I've had people say, well, if you had a more positive attitude or if you just smiled more or this or that. And I'm like, you go into a freaking cancer ward and you tell those people to smile more. And I would like to see you do that. It's just, I don't have a bone jetting out of my arm, from a compound fracture. So it's harder to tell, but there's actually chemical stuff going on that has just as much validity. And in fact, more so in some ways, because, the person who is sitting there with their bone in a sling, if at least everything's right and their dopamine levels are correct, they can at least go, well, this sucks, but I can still have a good day. I'll put a balloon over it and go swimming anyways. Whereas I can be perfectly fine and be like, no, the world is ending. And the only logical response is I'm going to go find a razor. Look at someone and say, well, if you just had more smiles, you'd feel better. Shows a pretty radical misunderstanding. And that's not to say that that person's a bad person or anything like that. I don't want to imply that, but definitely if you are suffering from mental health problems, you want to note that person and say, this is somebody I can't turn to on any kind of an important level because they fundamentally misunderstand the reality that I'm going through. That's not a bad thing. It's just a reality thing. They don't have the same life experiences that permit them to understand what's really happening here, any more than I would understand what it's like to photosynthesize. I'm just not built that way. So if my plant is like, I'm just not photosynthesizing today, I'd be like, well, if you got more sun, I'm not a good plant coach, and there's people out there who aren't good plant coaches for us either.
And thank you for talking about it. I think that the more we talk about it, that the less people are going to be ignorant about the fact that, yes, this mental health issue is still a fucking health issue. And it is as important, if not more, than someone who has broken bones and scrapes and burns. It's still a health issue. And that drives me crazy to no end. So I do think that the stigma will lessen if more people talk about it. And so,
well, I mean, we think we make good strides on it too, compared to what things were 20, 30 years ago.
For sure.
Without a doubt. I mean, I still think about every couple days, happened a month or so ago, but like that DJ who was for the Ellen show who, and
Twitch.
And then you think, and then here's a case of somebody who you always got the outer image of that sort of facade. Well, probably how he had to be for TV. Yeah. And, was a smiling, happy guy. And then you go, that's one of those, it's just such a head scratcher for me. And it kind of keeps me up at night.
I remember when that happened because that affected my wife because she immediately, I've had a really rough year and we have good ups and downs mentally, but like, we had to cut a family vacation short because I was seeing my kids floating face down in the river. I was literally seeing my dead kids. It wasn't really happening, but I was like, I can't be here because I keep seeing my dead kids, and that's not a great vacation experience. So like, that's kind of like the level that I've been functioning at a lot. And so when that happened, she was sending me all these emails about it because she's like, this is you. I show up and I'm perky and I'm fun. Or I'll go to a Comic-Con and I'll smile and shake hands. And everyone assumes, I've even been on podcasts where I talk about my mental health. And then in the comments, people diagnose me. They're like, he's a liar. He's actually a megalomaniac, narcissist, all this stuff. Because obviously he's not depressed. The one thing this guy isn't is depressed. Look at how he's presenting. He's so over the top. And this, and I'm like, well, first of all, you're an incredible medical professional to be able to diagnose me on a 6-second YouTube clip.
Yeah.
But regardless, like, nobody sees me after the Comic-Con when I go home and I can't function for 2 days. Literally, like I have a closet with a bed in it, and I go in my closet and I stay there for most of 2 days because I'm so overwhelmed and so frustrated with all the mistakes that I made and all the errors that, all the people that I destroyed. And, none of this is real, but this is what's happening in my head. If I don't have a chance to shake hands with a fan because, I have to go to another panel or something, that's going to spiral in my head into like, and that guy probably killed himself and it's on my hands, but I don't bring that to the Comic-Con. I take it away from the Comic-Con. And so people just assume like, oh, when he says it's bad, it's probably not that bad, because I'm really carefully keeping that crap away from here. I don't want other people, I tell my kids, like, here's reality is like, I will tell people if I have diarrhea because it's just a physical reality, but I try not to crap my pants in front of other folks at the same time. And so, it's really hard to tell if somebody's walking around in their business suit being like, I have terrible diarrhea today. And you're like, do you really though? Because you're dressed really nice and you're out with us. So, it's not until they have a horrible, horrible accident right in front of you where you're like, I think Ray's really sick, for some reason. We don't believe the person telling us because they're making effort to not poop their pants in front of us. And unless you're, crying in the corner, weeping, huddled in a fetal position, you probably don't have depression. And I'm like, well, I don't right now for 5 minutes, but as soon as we get off this little phone call, I'm going to go cry a lot. I just don't invite you to that part.
Right. And if you're an introvert by nature, you tend to push it all in and whatever's bothering you. Whereas an extrovert might shout out enough things bothering them that somebody will help them out.
I have taught myself to be like this. I literally went to my mom when I was a kid because I was like, I'm getting beat up a lot. Girls won't talk to me. You're the friendliest, nicest person I know. How do you do that? And she gave me a list of things. She's like, smile at the person, say their name. And I just memorized this list of stuff and I did it often enough. I can fake it. But extroverts, they come to something like this, and this is what they live for, is these interactions. And an introvert comes to something like this, and this is something I have pumped myself up for to handle. And then afterwards, I'll have to die a little bit inside. But whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, we all need that social interaction. There's people who are social hummingbirds and they need little bits of constantly. And then there's people like me, introverts or social anacondas. Like we come out of hiding once, have a big meal every 6 months and don't want to talk to anybody again. But we still have to have that or else we die. That's a form of nourishment. And that's a real danger. And in these times where we're so isolated and separated, as separated as we were because of our phones and social media, putting this, piece of glass between us and the world, and then COVID happened and it's so much worse. So that's just so critical. Like, I love that you mentioned that, Jerry. We do need to be able to talk about it and we need to be able to interact with people. And if you're the worst introvert in the world, and I'm one of those, the biggest mistake you can make is say, I'm going to be a hermit and not interact with anybody ever, because we have to have that interaction. We have to have that to keep us human, to keep us sympathetic, to keep us empathetic, and to keep us functioning. No matter who you are, if you go too long without some form of human interaction, you're just going to wither on the vine and die. I was living in South America. I was a missionary, is why I was there. And I had a missionary companion who was very quiet and very shy. And we would get out and we'd talk to people all day. And he came back one day and said, oh, Collings, I wish I was like you. I wish I could get out and talk to people. And I said, well, first of all, like we've talked about, it's really hard for me. So I'm not just doing it naturally. So first of all, you can learn to do that to some extent. Maybe you won't be the life of the party, but we can all improve. And then I looked at him and I said, and Terrell, I got to tell you, you're going to have more people at your funeral than I will, because as cool as it is for people to hear a joke or somebody who can make them laugh, the people that we need is someone who's going to listen to us. And you're just such a good listener. And I can tell when you listen to me, my friend, that you are my friend and you care about me. And so, cool. I can get out there and tell a joke in several different languages. And that's awesome. That's a legit skill. But just being able to sit there and want to connect with my humanity, which is what you do every day, that's inestimably valuable at a party, at the office, at home. Your skill is portable to any situation.
This episode is brought to you by Sugar Wish.
Sugar Wish is our gift go-to. What better gift is there than a consumable?
And by consumable, we mean that Sugar Wish allows you to give someone candy, coffee, wine, cookies, cotton candy, popcorn, savory snacks.
And don't forget doggy treats for your doggy gifts.
The best part is that Sugar Wish is big on saving us time. You just order on their website.
They send the gift via email or text to the recipient and arrives whenever you want.
Sugar Wish does not waste my time, but actually saves me time. Yes, please.
Use code Betty White. That's all caps, one word, Betty White, to save $7 off of your gift to someone.
Or you can head over to arneradventures.com/sugarwish to grab the code and link there.
Yep, that's arneradventures.com/sugarwish. It's also in the show notes.
Now back to the show.
But the wallflower spends like an hour absorbing everything till they come up with the most interesting observation of the evening.
Yeah.
And eventually that comes out. It's like, whoa, that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's happy to. I don't know. I've never ever once in my life been in a situation where the wallflower stands up and says something and they're like, whoa, listen, if you didn't talk in the first 40 minutes of the party, we don't want to hear from you. You know, like that's just, that's not how life works. Or, oh, I'm sorry, you missed your chance. Maybe there's somebody out there who says that, but that's kind of probably an a-hole anyways. That's a social problem that person has.
I guess we should get to your fast 5 questions.
Fast 5 questions.
Ooh.
Yes. Number 1, Addams Family or Munsters?
Oh, Addams Family. Munsters is so dumb. I'm sorry, I can't even pretend to be cool about that. If you're answering otherwise, you are a bad person.
Yeah, no, I'm Addams Family all the way. What are you? What are you gonna say now that he said that?
I thought, and I haven't watched any of them in so many years. I always felt like there was so many parallels, kind of like with Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie, where there was everything just sort of paralleled with those two shows. But
totally,
Addams Family has definitely they've got the whole movie thing going on, and I don't know. I'm 50-50 on
it. Wow. You really get to know
anybody who likes Munsters is a fine person. That's an easy one for me. I definitely prefer Addams Family.
And I guess should be put into context. Which one would you rather deal with? Okay. Zombie or vampire?
Are we talking singular or plural? Because the answers might change.
Well, we were talking about this as we were writing it for you, and we said the same thing. And I said, I think we're going to say singular.
So if it's singular, then zombie, because it's like, even if they're a fast zombie, I can deal with a zombie and you run away and, try and shoot them in the head and you should be okay. Vampires, they're old and they're, that's part of the scary thing about vampires is they're smarter than you are because they've been around for 200 years or whatever. And I'm not talking about Twilight vampires where it's like, all we've got to show for hundreds of years is a luxurious house and apparently never ending horniness.
Right.
I'm talking about like real vampires that like, I've been studying for 3,000 years how to destroy you. That's much scarier.
But then we're going to get really deep here. But then we started saying, I said, well, if you knew you had to die by, and I'm getting really like morbid here, but if you knew you had to die by one of them, I was like, I think I would rather die by the vampire because the vampire is just going to get your neck. It's going to be over pretty fast. Whereas the zombie, you're going to suffer. It's going to be terrible.
Yeah, no, either way, pass, hard pass.
Number 3, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but Lestat or Dracula?
Oh, Dracula. So much Dracula.
Really?
I think, I recently, I return and reread Bram Stoker's Dracula every couple of years. There's a magnificent Audible reading of it with Tim Curry. It's a cast reading, and so Tim Curry is Van Helsing. I think is it Anne Hathaway. There's a bunch of big stars, and it's amazing. So, excuse me, I had to clear my throat there.
Okay, I'm gonna get this.
Oh, it's fantastic. I hope it's like I have it. It might have been one of those Audible originals, limited time. I don't know, but it was so good. And I remember reading the screenplay to. I don't even know what it's called. The Vampire
Interview with the Vampire.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
brain fart from hell. I remember reading it because I was a script reader at Fox when it came out, and so it was going around and everybody was excited about it and stuff. And just as an industry thing, it was really cool. And so I read it and I was like, this is a really captivating script. I read it really quickly, and then I read the book, and I had the same response. It was captivating, it was interesting, and I hated every second of it. Like, there was no part of me that wanted to partake of that world, and it might just be because it was painted as such an ugly world, whereas in Dracula and Bram Stoker's Dracula, there's this sense of good and evil, and there's real good guys and real bad guys. And I also think Dracula doesn't get the love it deserves for the level of nuance and subtlety. Like, I remember reading it as a kid, and one of the most terrifying things being that the vampire has bitten someone, and they've managed to save her through blood transfusions, hanging garlic, keeping the vampire away. And they're like, well, at least she's safe. We've got her. We know how to protect her, and we can keep doing this as long as we need. And Van Helsing turns to the people and is like, she's going to die someday. And leaving it unsaid that whenever it is, tomorrow or 100 years, Dracula gets her, and what a chilling thought. Like, he bit her once, and now he owns her, and it doesn't matter to him whether it's tomorrow or 100 years, he gets her. And so the actual Dracula has so much cool stuff kind of going on underneath the surface. And so Interview with the Vampire, all of those books, and I've read several of them, they were well done. They had a lot of fascinating stuff. They did new things, which is always fun, to see someone twist something in an interesting way. But ultimately, it's sort of like Marvel movies versus the new DC movies. I love Superman. Superman's my favorite superhero. I love Batman. He's my number 2. And most of the DC movies suck because they forget the most important thing about any comic book movie, which is at the end, you should want to be a superhero. And Marvel movies get that. And DC movies don't. They've lost that joy. Like, oh, I'm going to be Superman and be a sad sack who mopes for the next 6 years. And nobody wants that. Like, oh, what do you get out of being Superman? I don't know, a therapist bill, and I feel really bad about everything. So I would participate in the long story short. Obviously, I'm a writer who used to be a lawyer because I cannot not talk. I would put on a top hat and tails and dance a waltz in the vampire world of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I have no desire to visit anything Anne Rice ever created.
Wow, you may have changed my mind. I would prefer for Michaelbrent Collings or Angelica Hart.
Don't care. I mean, here, Angelica Hart, for those who don't know, is a pen name I used for some romance books. And the only reason is there's a lot of women out there who won't read it if it's got a penis attached. And that's a weird thing for me. But I get it. Like, I was kind of disheartened when my dad was like, oh, the Hardy Boys weren't really written by a man. It was written by a corporation, probably mostly women. And I was like, really? That's not cool at all. But I was like 9 and I got over it. But some people don't. And so when I started writing romance, I wrote as Angelica Hart. But I had to stop because it was really hard. I was getting letters from like 40-year-old divorcees being like, you're the only woman who understands. And I'm like, you are going to kill me. Like, if you find out, you're just going to show up at my house and murder me. They will find my corpse all cut up and parts of me mailed to different places because she's so upset. So I had to stop that. It was just really draining emotionally.
Probing question for last: ketchup or mustard?
Oh my gosh. Mustard. I don't even like ketchup. I have to, and yes, this is partly the mental health thing, but like if ketchup touches me, I have to wash my hands. It's so gross.
Wow. I'm that way about a lot of things, but I like my ketchup and mustard actually mixed.
I like that mustard comes in many different varieties where ketchup is usually just ketchup.
And
see, I like the spicy mustards and the Grey Poupon and that. She's straight yellow mustard.
Yeah, like
that, and that's me. I'm a yellow mustard guy. But like, it's so funny because I'll go to a restaurant and less so now because I'm a threatening adult male. But like as a kid, I go, get my French fries and I'd say, "Can I have some mustard?" And the waitresses or the servers would give me crap. They're like, "Why are you putting mustard on fries?" I'm like, "Who are you? Why are you asking me this question?" But I don't understand why it's okay to put like mashed up sugar tomato juice on a French fry, but I can't put my mustard on it was just always kind of weirded me out, but I used to mix them up when I was a little kid, and I remember vividly mixing it up one day, and then just my brain being like, this shall not stand. And I never touched mustard or ketchup again. I just literally, it was an on-off switch. My brain's like, do you realize what kind of heresy you're committing right now?
Oh,
Never again.
What does a life well lived mean to you?
I think a life well lived, first of all, has to involve other people, and not as playthings, but as something you're trying to help. I think one of the biggest problems today is not everybody, but one of my least favorite things to hear is I'm living my truth. Because what that often means is I am going to do things that I like, regardless of the consequence to those around me. And I find that opprobrious. There's not a lot of things I have like really harsh language about, but I find that kind of lifestyle disgusting. Because if you want to live on a desert island and never impact anybody else ever, live however you want, man. I don't care. But the reality is everything we do impacts other people. So a life well lived is mindful of other people. And that doesn't mean you have to go out and be miserable. And I'm not talking easy answers. I'm just talking about like the fact that you really feel like you are this way or that way, or you really want this thing or that thing. And whatever you're thinking I'm talking about, you're probably wrong. I'm literally being general. I don't care what it is. No matter how important it is to you, if your only reason for doing it is important to me, irregardless of the impact on other people, shame on you. There are things that are so important, you must do it, even if they do hurt other people. So I'm not saying there's no times to do that, but I'm saying just thoughtless living of truth, I think, is one of the great maladies of today's world. So I think a life well lived is mindful of other people, is careful with other people, and doesn't seek perfection. But, if I could have on my tombstone, he wasn't perfect, but he got a little better every day, I would be overjoyed and have it be true. Because that's a real major accomplishment. I talk to my kids. We're religious people, and we believe in things like heaven and God and stuff. And I'm like, what? I wonder sometimes if the last big test when we get to heaven is God's like, you did great. You're here. I'm going to have Hitler show you around. And the big test is going to be like, well, it turns out Hitler was genuinely crazy and not responsible for his actions. And so he was kind of a good person at heart who had this crippling mental health problem. And so God decided, because he wasn't in charge of any of that, he gets in heaven, and like, I look at my kids and go, what are you going to do? Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not going to heaven if Hitler's in heaven, even though Hitler heaven is totally different and is an awesome guy and has been working really hard behind the scenes to take care of the Holocaust stuff, and I don't mean this to be offensive or lighthearted. Look, and I want to clarify, Hitler sucked. Like, I have nothing good to say about Hitler, but we don't know where people's internal situation is, and I tell my kids, you can judge actions. You can say murder is evil. You can say certain things are wrong and bad. But that's different than looking at the person who did it and saying they're evil, because you don't know where they're coming from and you don't know what they're going through. I have real strong viewpoints about things like pornography and things like that, but they do not extend to the people who are in that industry, because I don't know their situation. I don't know why they're there. I don't know what their thoughts are or why they're doing it. And I think a lot of the world's ills could be assisted, if not cured, if instead of vilifying the people who did it, we looked at the underlying causes. There's a big, with Roe being overturned, there's, the abortion debate is so huge. And my kids and I talk about that. And I always say, rather than focus on whether abortion is a good thing or a bad thing, or whether it's better to have that access or not, I'd like to look at the reasons women have abortions and see if I can help with that. Because most women aren't like, I've always wanted an abortion. It's always been a dream of mine to get pregnant so I can have an abortion. Usually an abortion is a signal that some plan of some degree went awry. Maybe a small plan. I didn't intend to get pregnant with my husband, whom I love, and I'm in a, relationship or whatever. And maybe it's a big, huge plan. I got raped last night, violently assaulted. No matter what, though, there's some something that didn't go right, and I'd rather see if I can reach out to people and be like, can I help you with that? Because I'd rather live in a world where abortion just isn't necessary than a world where abortion is litigated or legal or illegal.
Yeah.
So I think, it's a really long answer, but I guess a life well lived is trying your best to improve, and bearing in mind that improvement isn't a solo career. Improvement is a group effort, and group effort, not just helping me, but how do I help the group?
Yeah.
The best thing about being a writer is the essence of art is the creation of community. And I think more people would have better lives if we tried to make communities instead of winning arguments. I'd rather win a friend than a fight. And I think that would make a better world.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, community, like you contribute to your community. You try to make every single person helps to make the community better. And I also like when you said to be careful with each other. And I was just thinking what we talked about earlier, like if we just were really caring and hey, how are you? Not hey, how you doing, but really, how are you doing today? Like, how are you? And I just don't think we do that. And I don't think we're as gentle and careful with each other as we should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, this was so much different than I thought it was going to be. I mean, I just love
because I didn't wear my fangs and my blood is why.
I haven't seen one bat fly.
I bit all their heads off before the interview started. So
I know that we're going to link to how everyone can get your books and all of that. But if someone's listening and they want to know, how to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Honestly, the best way is probably just Google my first name. My first name is Michaelbrent, and it's all one word. And like I told you guys before the show started, I don't have a gold stick up my butt. It's just there's like so many Michaels in my family, and this way I know who's yelling at me. Like if I get a call from Michael, I know it's a telemarketer. It's not like a real friend, and I can just hang up on them. So just Google my name, and you'll get my Amazon page and my my website and my Facebook and all of that stuff. I'm the only Michaelbrent in the world.
Yeah. And we're going to link to a plethora of ways that they can get all of those and then your books and everything. But I mean, I cannot thank you enough for your time and for being here. And this was just lovely. I would love to have you back.
It's so fun. I would love it. You guys were awesome. I genuinely enjoyed this. And like, I like people, so it's not hard to make me genuinely enjoy it. But even for that, like, you guys were awesome. And I really enjoyed it. And you guys are lovely and have such a nice energy. And I looked through some of your shows and I listened to some of them before coming on and trying to do my homework. And I really like, you guys seem like you're trying to do what we talked about and trying to make some communities and some improvement. And I really respect that you're trying to the fact that you're living a little bit simpler of a life that's a little more dialed in on important things rather than trying to have all of the things and not enjoy them. So I heartily appreciate that. And think you folks were awesome.
Oh, no, likewise.
And thank you. Comments like that are always good reinforcement.
And I'll just say this too, is that your authenticity, and I know that word is thrown around a lot, but your authenticity and talking about all the things you talked about, I think is exactly how we contribute to a better community all around.
Once again, I really, really enjoyed that episode, and heck, we can't stop talking about it. It's a lot of great things to take away from there. I didn't realize the superior quality the Addams Family had over the Munsters.
Okay, I was going to say, what did you think about his answer about the Addams Family? You seemed a little like, ooh, I thought the Munsters would win that.
Oh, I think I kind of thought most people would kind of have them on the same level, but I do get that the Addams Family has had a lot bigger of a enduring quality, I should say. They had the movie thing going on over the years. So
do you think
that way?
With that being said, do you think if there had been a few movies, some actors, that people loved in with the Munsters, that it would have that endearing quality?
Well, yeah, and I pitched Munster family values to and it just didn't. I guess they didn't think it would live up to
Maybe Michaelbrent can get on it, but I'll tell you, he felt very strongly about the Addams Family, so I don't think that he would do it. I don't think you would.
I don't think at all, but I love strong opinions like that.
I do too. Well, look, similarly to Vampire Lestat and Dracula, I thought for sure,
Yeah.
I thought for sure he was going to say Lestat. And in fact, he was not even a fan of Anne Rice's books. So it went, but you know what? We said this later that night. I was like, God, I think he really changed my mind.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, you did. And I was lost on the whole thing because I thought Lestat was a Canadian beer, so I really had to catch up on that afterwards. But yeah, he's just a real authentic guy, very transparent. We just enjoyed the heck out of this.
You know, we really did. Successes and accomplishments are wonderful. Running your own business, everyone, looks at, oh my gosh, you're your own boss. We talked about this in the episode. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. And you have a perception of how someone is going to be, how an episode's going to go. And it bears off into a different direction. And this was in the most beautiful way. I think that we talked about this in the intro, that one of the reasons we love our guests and that they are sparks in our lives is that they are so, here's that word again, authentic about their challenges. And it makes them so relatable, so much more human. And I just hope that you all understand and appreciate how amazing that is when someone opens up and talks about that, because we did not know about any of, the mental health struggles that he had before the episode. It was not even going to be a bullet point to talk about because we really did not know.
No, we didn't, but it flowed along in a wonderful way. And I think that could be, insightful to a lot of people.
Yeah. And we just cannot thank Michaelbrent enough for his openness.
Thank you, Michaelbrent. If this episode resonated with you, or if you know of someone who would benefit from anything we talked about today, or any episode, our guests, or anything, please share it with a friend. It's a great way of supporting the podcast and us, and we really appreciate it.
Another way of supporting the pod is by leaving us a 5-star review or rating on the platform you're listening to us on. Oh, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button because that also supports us. We would love that.
You can always find us, links we refer to during the show, and any of the podcast sponsors at arneradventures.com or linked here in these show notes. And until next time, enjoy that journey you're on. We're wishing you lots of adventures.
Adios.
Arrivederci.
Au revoir.
Adios.
Sayonara.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Dos vidaniana.